bullshit masterclass. Recording in progress. We're nice people, but we're going to edit ruthlessly. We're going to give you feedback. We're here because we love you, and we've got an hour and a half, so we're not going to like couch things. We're here so you learn how to be better grant writers. So our goal today, speak up, be here, however you are. I know it's really easy to be multitasking on these calls. I start to lose my grasp on reality if I'm just staring at little black boxes, wondering what you're doing. So please feel free to chat and raise your hand and ask questions. We're going to talk through the common grant challenges we hear. And this is absolutely a discussion. Throw your challenges in there, new music gathering team, everyone. This is open discussion, and there might be challenges that you have that we don't have on here. Right. Then we're going to do our 2 30-minute grant reviews, masterclass style. And then if we have a quick time to do some resource sharing, that's something we like to do. What is not working for you? What resources do you need? Someone here probably has them. We really think that the nonprofit sector is better together. And then we have a few exciting upcoming opportunities we want to share. So the common grant challenges that we hear, and this has come from the last, 10 years of doing this, teaching this class, is finding the right grant opportunities. Like how do you find grants? And I saw someone say, like, are there low-hanging fruit? And that's often one of the most challenging parts of grant writing. And, at some point, Lainey, we should do a whole workshop on just prospect research. And then, of course, keeping organized, which sounds so trite, and we all probably say, oh, this will be the year I get organized. But on top of everything else you're doing, how do you actually stay on top of those deadlines, figure out the attachments you need, find time to share qualitative and quantitative data? You're doing everything else. I have a 4-year-old, I run a business, I have a bratty cat that keeps climbing a tree. Like, when do you do this? And then, of course, one of the reasons that probably drew you here, how do you write the right language? How do you write a grant? It seems like this weird robotic thing where all of a sudden we're just like shitting out words that don't make sense. And once we've hopefully written that grant, how do you show your impact, particularly in the arts? How do you quantify and qualify what you're doing? Particularly if, like most of us, you went to art school or you got an English degree and suddenly you're having to try to figure out the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. But there's ways you can do it. I believe in you. And then how do you build that funder process? And how do you just feel good about this? Like you figured it out. This is part of your life. Yes, it's hard, but it's not this constant source of like, oh shit, what am I doing? So Jess, do you want to take this one? How you could stay organized and on top of deadlines?
Yes. So it's a challenge for a lot of people. Some people, not so much, but I think it's really about finding the right tool that works for you. So I am kind of curious, like, as we want to make this kind of an open discussion, I'm really curious if anyone has something top of mind that they really like or they really don't like about their grants calendar or how they keep on top of grant deadlines or grant reporting dates.
Yeah.
We got, okay.
We've got, currently working on a final report. Yeah, so Adam, how do you stay organized?
Do you
Google Drive folders? Yeah, I mean, it's so simple. And, we, one of the things that we really, really promote is have a grants calendar. And I love reminders. Yes. So we'll share as follow-up, and Lainey can send it out. We have a grants calendar template that you can use. You can use an Excel doc, a Google doc, Asana, Trello. I mean, insert your project management tool of choice. And then stay organized, because here's what happens. And it's happened to me and it's happened to Jess. You get a grant, yay. You're busy, your hair's on fire, you stick that grant agreement in that Google folder that you're going to check. And then a year later, you go, oh shit, we have a final report due. What did I do? And I've actually had clients like miss the final reports, and nothing says we have our shit together than missing a report. So that organization, is key. And we bring it up first because it's easy to overlook. And then Daniel had a great question, the almost. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. About how do you find grants that fit. So, your number one homework is if you don't have a grant calendar and you're just like, ooh, a grant opportunity, woohoo, get a grant calendar, because this is an ongoing thing. And because you might find grants, maybe Danny finds a grant that does fit, or maybe, after this, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so inspired, I'm going to do prospect research, but it's not due till January. I'll remember. At this point in my life, I can't remember when I'm like eating for dinner tonight. So put it on your grants calendar. I love it. Yes, Lainey, grants, calendars, people. No one will ever remember. So stay organized. Number one rule of grant writing. And I feel like I'm allowed to say this because one of our like number one people she went to conservatory. We do a lot of work. She's like, all our artists are hot messes. They can't remember anything. So that's why we preach the power of the grant calendar.
Yes.
So how do you write a strong proposal that addresses all of the funders' questions? This is kind of a trick question, but I'd love to hear from y'all, like when you're writing a grant, and Danny, I haven't forgotten your question and it's part of it. When you're writing a grant, how do you answer all of the funders' questions? You try to make yourself excited by your own language. Yeah, like this is a cool project. Let's get excited. But here's the secret. Just answer their questions. One of the number one challenges we see is you have a way of talking and we get very committed to it, whether it's fatigue or you're rushing because you didn't put it on the grants calendar and it's due tomorrow and it's 11 o'clock at night, or you are really committed to what you wrote because it was so good, or there's a little bit of ego, or you're just like, I hate writing grants, I'm just going to copy and paste. Every funder is looking for different things. And I can tell with the questions that are coming in, y'all know that. But one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're improving your grant language is to just write like a real person and actually answer each and every question. I love Yaska, please correct me if I'm spelling your name wrong. Love that. Like, don't use buzzwords.
Correct. Yeah.
Yasha, thank you. Don't use buzzwords. Yasha's so right there. And then I pretend each question, especially in prose, is just a short answer quiz. Yeah. And so sometimes it's really painful because you've written the most beautiful like NEA grant and you had 3,000 characters to flesh out like why you do this work. And you're so excited. And then the next grant is 75 words to summarize everything you do. And you're like, we do music. Please give money. You have to answer the questions, write like a real person. And I love that everyone is reiterating this. And, it sounds like you're all doing this, which is amazing. And so we're here to say, keep doing that. And honestly, sometimes grant questions are not great. They ask the same thing 12 different ways. So there is a sort of craft of like, how do you get all the pieces together? But at the end of the day, answer all the questions. And I love, yes, I color code the text. I just assume every grant writer is exhausted and bored. Oh my God, seriously. They're reading the same like buzzwords over and over again. So talk like a real person and really ask every question. Did you answer this to the letter? Y'all are all over this. This is great. Totally. Jess, anything to add?
Yeah, I want to add that one thing that I like to do, especially on those grants that have 6 questions that seem the same and just said a different way, I will do some bullet point notes before I actually write to say, what is my main point here? What is my main point here? So that's just one way for my brain to get organized before I actually put it all together and make sure I'm not repeating information or getting, that verbose, like cutting out the verboseness, right? Like, let's get to the point and answer the question.
Yes. And it's such a puzzle where one grant might ask for, your mission, history, background, and who you serve. And then one grant might ask for who you serve, your impact, what you're going to do. And it's so easy to copy and paste what you've already written and then try to tweak it, but really going back, and some of you have said like highlighting what I've written or highlighting what the grantor's asking for, to make sure that you're putting the puzzle together in the right place, because you probably do have a lot of the pieces, whether that's the productions you're doing, you're not going to be like dramatically rewriting those, or whether it's your, organizational history, but it's really a puzzle. So here's the big one for the arts. How do you show your impact with data, which we're scared of because we're artists, with qualitative and quantitative data? And this is something that, again, can be so scary. And a lot of times when at least for me, when we end up in conversations about data, it's very easy to feel you need to be at an, PhD university level doing peer-reviewed research studies to prove that you're saving the world through music. Often what funders are looking for is, do you know where you're going with this work, and how are you going to measure success? And I think this is something that can be so terrifying for us, but so important. I was on an NEA feedback panel a few months ago, and that was the number one ping that this client got was the metrics you're sharing of how you're going to measure success are really anemic compared to the rest of the grant. So it can be obviously very, very hard if you're only talking about music or an art installation or something, but most times, we have some sort of social justice commitment or some sort of education component. And so a more anemic way of showing data would be like, we're going to reach diverse audiences. What the hell does that mean? Who are they? What are they? How many? How are you going to know? Because that's so amorphous. How are you going to report back on that? And what you're saying to a funder is, we have like a pretty good idea, but we don't really know how we're going to get there. And we're hoping that you don't notice that we don't know. So on purpose. So rather than, these sort of big picture things, how do you just get specific? And again, just say what you're doing like a real person. So if you're going to be performing 6 concerts, say we're going to be performing 6 one-hour concerts with these artists. If you have a commitment to something that is different than what's typically heard, which I imagine you all do, which is why you are part of this, talk about that. Talk about the number of living composers you're programming, talk about the number of BIPOC or women-led or trans composers that you are programming, or the people that are making this up, and get specific. And of course, you might not know exactly, but you need to be able to project. If you are doing outreach or education or collaborations, it's the difference between we're going to do outreach to underserved populations versus we're going to offer at least 4 concerts in public settings for no cost, and we expect 50 people from this neighborhood to come. Even if you don't meet those goals that you've set, you've shown the funder that you know what you're working towards. And it can be so tempting to make these specific to the funder and like bullshit them. But this is also going to help you in the same way that I know you probably don't go into a season or whatever you do with like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We'll do something. You have goals. This is the same way that you need to have those goals articulated from a funding side, but also from a programmatic side. Jess, anything to add?
Totally. I would just add that you're really connecting the dots here.
Yes.
That's like my biggest advice as you're thinking about this.
Yeah. It's like part of the puzzle, right? Like how are you
the funder, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. Are we making random guesses about how many people might come and how many people might want to come? This is so hard. So this is another area where, depending on the maturity of your organization in terms of your administration, your infrastructure, how many do you have a staff, like woohoo, starting to track or starting to think about how you can pull that data. Like, yeah, and Adam said, like, I guess based on my last events, for sure. Mm-hmm. What is a staff? I know, right? Like I assume none of you here are like, well, we have a development team of 3 people and I'm just here for fun. No, so how do you do this? If you can track the number of people who come to an event, or the number of
live streams,
or whatever it is that you already are sort of measuring success by. Just say that, and maybe you project 10%. That's your goal. Don't just like pull a number out of the air, because you do have to report on that. And as you're going through this grant process, start to think about, what are the things you wish you could say, and can you track them? Like, do people sign up to get tickets? Do people, how can you sort of capture who they are, what they do, why they're coming to you? And again, I think, what are the things you wish you could say? A bigger conversation, to be sure, but I want to plant the seeds that this doesn't have to be scary, and you shouldn't throw up your hands and say, well, we don't serve, we don't rescue cats. That's so cut and dry. I've rescued 100 cats and we adopted 90 cats. Look at that. Or we're not doing addressing food insecurity. It can be so hard when we are in this amorphous place of the arts to measure impact, but we could talk about screw the cats, Lainey. We could talk about what you're doing, and what are the breadcrumbs to follow to success.
Ooh, breadcrumbs, I like that.
Yeah, we're using so many different metaphors, like breadcrumbs, stepping stones, cats, puzzles, as we're talking about using real people language. Okay, so here is, how do you find the right grant opportunities? And I'm going to go back to Danny's question. How do you write? This is like the hardest part of grant writing, and to me, it's the most important. So Jess, this is like your bread and butter. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah,
I'll kick us off here.
I'll jump in. I would go as far to say that finding the right opportunity is 75% of your time doing grant writing, right? Yeah. So it takes the most time to make sure you find an aligned opportunity. And I'm going to go back exactly to see what Daniel said. Just saying, okay, so his question was, I have many projects that seem to almost fit the grants. And I always wonder if I should basically adjust. What I would say is that you're not going to want to adjust what you do in order to meet an opportunity. You don't want to be going to find the money in that way. You want to be true to yourself and your mission, first and foremost. So I think what can really help here is making sure that as you're looking for opportunities, finding alignment in those kind of key places. What type of location is the funder interested in funding geographically, right? And another main piece is just kind of the priority topic, right? So obviously art, but are they talking specific music? Are they talking about music education? If they're interested in funding music education and you're really trying to get funding to put on a concert, then there's not clear alignment there.
And you're not going to create a new program.
Right. Yes, that's too much.
Because you want the money. Don't do that.
Don't do that. You've already got too much going on. So that's where, maybe you would just table that funder, because at this time they're not funding those types of projects. And then the third big category is population, right? So what is the identified group of people that this funder is interested in serving? Is it youth? Is it people with disabilities? Is it, I'm just trying to think of, there's so many different funders, obviously, that we know, but they have a very specific population that they are typically looking to impact. Does that align with the population you're working with? So again, the biggest difference is adults, children. If they're interested in working with adults, but you're looking to putting on a children's concert, you're not exact alignment. So you're looking for alignment in those three categories. And again, you're going to want to have a short list. My recommendation really is if you do a search, you're going to get a long list, right? But you're going to want to start to whittle down and focus on those couple of opportunities that really do have alignment. And that's where that's where your bread and butter is going to be for and increasing your likelihood, your chances
Yeah.
as you apply. So I know that it's tough, but if you think about those kind of three categories, that is the start to getting you on track and um, uh, using your time wisely to start with those opportunities.
Yeah, because you don't want to write something that you're stretching. Like it's not gonna work. It's really not gonna work.
Yeah, it's not going to work, and it's not worth anyone's time.
Yeah.
And I'll share a tip that Catherine and I like to share is if you are able to reach out to the program officer to ask questions, that is such a sweet spot to engage them and actually ask if your program and your mission and what you're doing aligns with their priorities. So again, it's a lot of focus on what is the funder's priority. And so that's how I like to open those conversations.
Yes.
What are your, I want to talk about your priorities and see if they align with what we're doing.
Yeah. I'm curious, just like raise your hands or drop in the chat box if you routinely reach out to program officers or grant makers before you apply, because no, yeah, that is to me, if you have, if you take one thing away from this, so if you're hoping like this is our key takeaway, call the program officer. They're there to help. They're 99% of the time super friendly, and that 1% of the time they're super weird and it's like a great story. But Lainey doesn't want to bug them. So here's the thing. They're there to be bugged.
Yeah.
They are there to vet. They're the gatekeepers. They're not the decision makers. They're the gatekeepers to make sure that their board gets the right applications and they know what they're looking for. And so they want to answer questions. And it's so powerful. So for instance, I literally just got an email before we got off the phone that there had been a longtime funder of one of our clients had, and they just like randomly stopped funding. Like they were going from like $10,000 to like $1,000, which is like, fuck you money, right? Like, sure, whatever. And so the development director called and they said, we still really want to support you guys. Yes, but we shifted our funding priorities. And I guess we didn't like put it on our website or tell anyone. So you don't really align. Which happens all the time, right? Particularly in this time of COVID. So that was a little bit different because they're funding food insecurity. However, when you have a program that's innovative, that's doing something different, which you're all here, that grant maker might be like, oh, we're really interested in funding our music by women, or music by first generation composers, or music by Latinx composers or something. And you might go like, oh, well, I was going to apply for this thing, but in the spring we are applying for, we're going to do a whole concert just by Latinx women. Like, what a great fit. Would that be of interest to you? And so Lainey said, well, what if I don't have a question? Think of one. The question is always like, hey, I think we align. I wanted to get a sense of your current funding priorities, and you have particularly in the time of COVID, to see if they've shifted, to see what's going on, and to see if there might be alignment for us to submit a grant. And it's not a burden. It's not a overstep. It's what those program officers want to hear, because they can tell you yes or no. You're going to save so much time. You made a 10-minute phone call and you're either going to get that like, yes, enthusiastic, make sure you talk about this, or you're not a good fit. And the great thing is when you say the yes, enthusiastic, make sure you talk about this, they're giving you what to write about. They're going to say, write about this, write about that. I had that lately, like really stress this part. Our board is so into cats. They love cats. So if you don't talk about cat, you got to talk about cats in there. We'll figure that out. Or they're really like focused on X, or they have a board member who, whatever they have in their personal lives going on.
They like to hear about this neighborhood or this community.
Yeah. They just bought a house in this neighborhood and they're really into it. So you get that like insider look, and then you can incorporate that if appropriate into your proposal. And you're not going to talk about, if they're like, we hate dogs, don't talk about dogs, don't talk about them. So it is your number one rule of number one go-to. Just call that program officer, shoot them an email. 5 minutes on the phone is going to transform your ability to find the right grantors. And I would say a little bit beyond that, Jessica, do a deep psych. Yes. No. Yeah. Just really like, what's going on? What's your board looking for, kind of thing.
That's just to really call it out. Focus on them. Let's talk about your priorities. I want to understand them better. What do you mean when you say music production?
Yeah. What kind of music production, right? Yeah. Like if they're like only doing Gilbert and Sullivan, maybe you're not the right fit, so just really wonderfully laid out these 3 pillars to look for. And it sounds like a lot of you are pretty familiar with that. But I will say that that's something that we can get hung up on. Like, well, they're not funding this, so I'm a bad organization. No, it's the same way. We've all got our priority areas. You like cats, you don't like dogs, whatever it is. I think of looking for grants as like a Venn diagram of all of the ways that you could intersect. So you found your list of, they fund in this area, they fund these people, and now you can think a little bit bigger than just music or just art. And I think that's another area where we can be very insecure. A case study to share is we have an organization we work with down here in Central Texas that's a community choir, but it's paid. It's a professional community choir, and their grants were boring. And I'm going to venture to say that some of your grants might be boring, which is why you're here. And they were very much like, we are a choir and people sing music because music is nice. And we've been doing this for 55 years and we want to keep bringing nice music. And they were a little afraid to like be who they were. So we started working together. And as soon as you stripped off the stress of the grants of like, you have to sound like a professional, all of a sudden they're telling me like, oh, our composer in residence is a queer Latinx immigrant, and he really focuses on creating new music, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to program a whole concert series that is contemporary music from living trans composers for women's voices. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I love me some Beethoven, but that's interesting. And now you're looking at different funding priorities outside of just music. Elevating women, elevating trans voices, elevating BIPOC-led communities, elevating immigrant voices. All of a sudden, their Venn diagram of the intersectionality in which they were working got so much bigger. And they were able to start looking at social impact grants to talk about why they were doing that. And it was just being not even courageous enough, but feeling like they could say like, look, we're queer. Like we're a weird queer organization making weird queer classical music. And that's what we do. And we do it better than anyone else. And that confidence in what they were doing, and then finding grantors that weren't necessarily exactly classical music for community choirs, really has allowed them to find more prospects. So that was like the whole thing. Any questions, ideas? I know we didn't exactly answer the question of like, where do you find this? And I'd say it's less like, there's no magic bullet of like, we'll just go to this website. It's just how you look, through what lens you look, and then calling the grant officers. Yeah. Okay, love it. So last question before we start doing our grant review, masterclass style. How do you feel confident in the whole grant making process? What did you do to make this work for you? And maybe you're not feeling so confident right now. What would confidence look like? How do we put the pieces together and make this work so it's part of your programmatic life, your fundraising life, and not this like icky necessary evil you have to get to at the end of the day? Adam says confident with local, national, not so confident. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, Adam. What makes you feel a little less confident? So yeah, so where you're awarded. Yeah, so like if you get the money, you're like, I got this. When you're going out into a new field, we're encouraging you to think a little bit outside the box of just funding for music. What else is going on? That can be a little anxiety inducing. Federal grants just make me want to curl up in a ball and cry, how do you feel confident? And I think it's really sort of following these breadcrumbs or whatever that we have laid out here, right? And putting the pieces together and then just doing it, and just continuing to do it and continuing to not take those rejections personally, but constantly looking at how you can evolve, how you can, be innovating who you're looking for and how you're talking. Jess, what do you have anything to add?
I will just add that every once in a while, I like to have someone take a look at my grant writing that doesn't know the topic, the thing I'm writing about, anything, because that does give me confidence when I can have either somebody come back with questions or point out that I need some clarity. So that is one way that I can feel more confident in this whole process.
Yeah, I think that's such a great tip. And I mean, gosh, we've been doing this for so long, and Jess and I still once a week or so are like, hey, can you look at this? Does this make sense? Because my brain is fried, or I've written this same grant 100 times, or hey, we keep submitting to this funder year after year and it's getting rejected. Can you look at it with fresh eyes and see what else is going on? So how many rejections do you have to endure before you start at the idea that perhaps your organization is probably not going to get any grants? Such a good question, Danny. I would say if you're routinely getting rejections, like for every grant, and you've been doing it for a while, I'm glad you're here, right? Because it's probably not that your organization isn't worthy of grants or shouldn't have grants. It probably is an indicator that you are not grant ready in some capacity. And grant readiness is, are you writing the right language? Do you have those goals and objectives, or could those be revised? Are your attachments up to snuff? Are you presenting everything in the package? And so that's where maybe I would go back to the drawing board. And we actually have a grant readiness quiz that I'll send out as like part of our wrap up as well. Like, these are the things that you need to be grant ready, and really look and see, like, are there parts of this that we could improve, right? And then to Lainey's point, how many times should you apply to the same grant after not getting it ever? I don't know, like 3? Jess, what do you typically? I kind of think like 3.
I was just going to say 2 or 3. And if at that point you haven't talked to anybody at the foundation,
call them. Call them before you nix it.
Yeah, and that's a great way to say, hey, we've applied a couple of times, wanting to just chat about your priorities, because I want to see if there's some alignment here before I potentially submit another proposal. Yeah,
so Lainey is going to call them. And I will say, do 3, call them, have Danny call, yes. Lainey doesn't want to call, she's afraid of you, and they'll be like, why would I give her a grant? You can always do, and this is like terrible advice, but it sometimes works, is like do the Hail Mary grant and just like write something that's like super from the heart. Like, we had this with a funder where there was this funder that was super like such a good funding priority. And every year Steph would write this grant that was like 100% like official and aligned and copied and pasted. And we kept getting rejected. And finally she's like, look, this is not working. So she wrote an LOI that was like super emotional and narrative and storytelling and like pulling the heartstrings, and they got it. And it was clearly some disconnect between the way that they sort of presented themselves externally and what their board was looking for in new people, new fundees. And so I'm not saying just say like, fuck it and write whatever you want. But if you're routinely not getting grants and you've called the program officer, think about like, how else can I position this? What else can I say? Even if it feels a little out there, a little different than the way I normally talk. And often that freshness, I mean, yeah, sometimes you just got to keep applying. So if there's like a big one that you want to do, like just keep applying. But typically, I'd say like 3-ish times, and then maybe take a year off, check that you're grant ready, call their program officer. Yeah, and if it's the Guggenheim, yeah, I mean, like we have a funder here, Impact Austin, where people will apply 10 times, but it's like the elite grant that people want to get. So yeah, really, really great questions. So we're ready to move into the grant review session part of today. So any last questions about sort of overall, how do we do this before we ask a few folks to share? Okay, we're just swearing at the NEA, yes, and no, I'm so here for it. So we had a few people submit grants ahead of time, and there was one that I looked at. So before I do like an open call, do we have? Hold on, I know you can only see my screen. I don't think there's anything that interesting. The New Arts collaboration on the call. Just throw a chat if you're here and this is your grant. You might be coming tomorrow. Okay, I'm gonna go with no. If you are here, we can do New Arts, Bueller. So if you have a grant that you would like us to review, we're gonna do 2. Raise your hand with the little chat raise feature. We've got a panelist, yep. Any attendees here have a grant they want us to take a look at? And you can think about it while we do the first one, so you know that we're not too scary. Come on, attendees. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and start with New Music Gathering. They're throwing themselves on the pyre of this masterclass. Jess, do you want to take it or do you want me to take it? We didn't even talk about that.
We didn't. Why don't I start and we'll just make this conversational.
And here's, so we haven't reviewed their grant. This is the first time we're seeing it. Mm-hmm. So it is as if we are funders reading it for the first time.
Okay, I'm ready. How should we?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hold on. Stop share. Now, Lainey, you're going to share, right?
I'm going to share. Now, I should say I'm not going to do a New Music Gathering grant. That's actually the 5 of us all mind melding. I'm selfish and I want Lainey help. Because I feel like Music Gathering is more grantable and successful than Lainey, the poor futzy composer. So I thought I'd give you my grant that I one of the pile that I didn't get because I don't get them. But this one I really thought I was going to get. I was like, oh, this is my dream project. I'm working with amazing people. I have a track record of working with them. And then I didn't get it. And I was like, what happened? So I just want you to tell me.
Okay.
How do you want me to do it? Do you want me to put a link to it in the chat or do you want me to screen share or what would be helpful?
So I think screen share is fine, right, Jess?
Sure. Yeah, screen share is probably easiest.
Okay, let me get it up. Oh gosh. Everyone on the call, just, be kind.
Remember, flexibility, go with the flow.
We're going to be nice to Lainey. How could you not be nice to Lainey?
We're going to be nice to Lainey.
No, I'm always pushing Lainey to apply for more things for her music because her music
really
is really great.
It's
really, really great. And I'm pushing Lainey to bug people because she's a fucking spectacular composer.
Yeah, love having a
like as worthy of any grant. I'm not just saying this. As worthy of grants as anybody. And I know Lainey and I kind of get into occasionally with we're the people who don't get the grant.
Yeah.
And it becomes like almost a character trait. Like I'm pushing
but
against
it's comforting. It's like, oh, Danny, who writes this also doesn't get grant. Wow, we're buddies.
Yeah.
Like it's sadly comforting.
Yeah. Well, I will say so. Oh, go ahead, Danny.
I'm going to say, since this is the year of full disclosure, I have never, when I've personally applied for a grant or a prize, I have literally never gotten it. With one exception, I got $600 from a rescue grant because the World Trade Center was a few blocks from me when it fell down. That's literally the only money I've ever gotten as a personal composer. So I'm doing something. I'm doing something totally wrong. So I'm here for this.
And
I mean, it's also competitive, right? It's a very competitive field.
It's really impressive. I live in New York City, and I'm a white male, and I think I'm writing interesting projects, but so are a lot of people, and I know there's reasons, and I'm not even mad. I'm just saying it's a fact. I don't get these things. I've probably applied to 500. Literally, that I've never gotten.
I thought I'd have this open. This isn't even comprehensive, but I've gotten one grant ever, and it's because I applied with Jack Quartet, and their grant writer, they have a grant writer, and she wrote the grant, and then we got that, so that's great. But when I write it, look at all this stuff. None of it. I didn't get any of it. So I thought I'd just start with like, oh, look at these little folders, and I don't get those.
I love the organization. This is a great example of organizing by funder.
Yeah, it's a little
You know?
here. And Yasha
And
Narvison really helped me with that. Just a shout out to Yasha Narvison.
I will say
Adam,
that
I do hate grants.
as Lainey's looking for that, one thing that I forgot to include in this is Steph on our team, who is an artistic director of a Shakespeare company, always yells at our artist cohorts to don't let the head trash rule, right?
Yeah.
We have this mentality of, one, we're doing this for the art, and we are going to be starving artists in our garrets like in La Boheme, and if we make money, we are selling out to the capitalism. Sure. Okay, but like, let's sell out and get some money because you all deserve to be paid a living wage.
I want to sell out.
Let's sell out in a good way.
Yeah.
And two, like, don't let the head trash of like, you're not worthy of money. If your art's not funded, it means you're a trash person. Like, there's so much of that is so endemic in the nonprofit sector, and particularly in the arts. And so anytime you talk to Steph, she's going to be like, don't let the head trash take over. So here we are, no head trash, let it go. You are worthy of money. You are worthy of funding. Jess, take it away.
Yes, you are absolutely worthy. Okay, so tell me a little bit about this grant. So this personal statement, is this about you and your work to give some background and history?
Exactly. So like,
Okay.
so the different questions are personal statements. So just me as an artist, what's my jam? I think, I'm sorry, I don't have the prompts right in front of me. I could probably get those up, but it's like, tell us your influences and the work where you're interested in moving your career. So I did that.
Okay.
And then over here is the project description. So I did a nice little project description.
Okay.
And then they had enhancement funds, and I just decided like, oh, you can request up to 1,500 of enhancements. I was like, well, might as well. So I requested enhancement funds.
Okay.
And I broke it down, and then just all the like personal info that I guess I won't screen share on a public thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and this was for a foundation funder?
Yeah, this is the Jerome Foundation. They have this thing. I guess they still have it. This was in 2013. They have something called the J Fund that gave thousands and thousands of dollars to awesome artists and people I really believed in. So I felt like there was alignment because I looked around at my community and I thought, oh, they're getting J Fund grants. I love the work that comes out being supported by J Fund, so I'll apply too. And I thought this was my strongest project. Like, really awesome people, really clear idea of what I wanted to do, and a history of working with the same people having had success. So I put my eggs in there.
Let's go back down to that page 2 where you're talking about the project.
Okay, great.
Okay, so first, tell me what's the coolest thing about the project? Like, what gets you excited about it, and why?
Yeah, even reading this paragraph, I'm like, oh, how boring and buzzwordy. Why did I do that in 2013? I was excited about the people I was working with. Like, they don't no longer call themselves VA Vocals, but this is Melissa Hughes, Martha Kluver, Caroline Shaw, and they have this vocal trio. And I had just finished a big project with them and a bunch of instrumentalists, and I thought, oh, I want to keep working with them. They're awesome. And we wanted to do a math opera. So I just, like, they are really into math. I used to be a math teacher. Like, oh, I'm going to take this old ancient Greek geometry text and make it a vocal trio with cool designer lighting to illustrate math.
Wow, that is really cool. That's really cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're the composer.
I'm the composer, yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Very cool. So I would say that I'm not, at least skimming this here, I'm not getting that awesome sense of we're gonna do this new innovative composition. So that is like the first thing that sticks out to me is that I'm not getting that feel right away.
No exploring intersections.
Yeah, I think Lainey said it, so we're allowed to say it. The first 2 paragraphs of this, I've fallen asleep. This is boring. It's boring. You're not boring. No one's like, oh man,
boring.
Lainey's so boring. Her music's boring. She's boring.
So I want to share something. I don't want this to be like a full blanket generalization, but people truly do remember stories.
Yeah.
Right. And so particularly when you're talking about like the project description, you want to make it a story for no matter who is reviewing it, because you never know who the funders have gathered to review your grants. So we as humans remember stories, and I would say that that is here like an opportunity to really make it a story. And expand on like the development of your continued relationship,
Yeah.
and
So
which is what
personal,
gets
like
you excited.
getting, I guess I'm scared always of being, because my default is super personal. And I'm scared of being too conversational personal.
So here's the thing, Lainey. What does the intersection of abstract music ideas and accessible theatric structure mean to you as a human being? Like in normal language, what does that mean?
It's like do 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 do, and like very clear, cool bodies moving with lights and stuff.
Whoa.
Okay.
Cool. I did not get that.
No, why would you? Oh,
Yeah. And like as a I don't live in this world, right? I'm not a performing arts person anymore. Like I'm a patron of the arts. This literally means I don't even like know what that means until you start to tell me.
Yeah.
And this is like the number one thing that we rip into our grant folks with, is like that doesn't mean anything. What does accessible mean? Does accessible mean it's wheelchair accessible? Does accessible mean I can bring my 4-year-olds? Does accessible mean that I can bring my racist Uncle Tom?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So like, if in your ideal world, would I just like just get rid of the first 2 paragraphs and start out? Well, no. So I'd start out with just, I'm so excited to keep working with these fabulous performers I've worked with in the past. I'm a math teacher. I want to make math into my music. We're gonna do it.
I would start there, right? Yeah. And then like expand upon it, right? So I would even go as far to say is like, how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah.
Like thinking through like, okay, so me as a composer, I've worked with, outline that you've worked with the vocals, done some cool projects, and now you are really excited to create this new project piece, which is
Yeah.
Okay. That would be, do you have any thoughts on that, Catherine? Real, like just kind of opening with, hey, we got this long-standing relationship and this partnership, and we're really excited to develop and launch this new project.
Yeah, like Yaska said, like there aren't enough operas about Euclid's Elements, and I am to change that. And so I think one thing is, Lainey, and I think there's a lot of, we get stuck up on like, how do I write this? Like, sit down and write it. Screw the first few paragraphs. I always write the end first. I think that's another writing tip. Like if you've got an executive summary, or if you're really stuck on that transition paragraph, I'll always come back and write it. So I am so interested reading this, like what about an opera about Euclid's Elements inspired by you being a math teacher is fascinating. So the climactic sessions will involve the text, like, so really dig more into that. Because this is very high level. And there are some points, like I am a math teacher as a composer, and the elegance of his basic, like that, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get that. But as a non-math person, I have an English degree, and as someone who has not been like a working artist in 15 or 20 years, I'm having a hard time seeing this. I'm having a hard time seeing what I know that if I took you out for a drink, you could talk my ear off, and I'd be like, holy shit, like, when do we go? Like, right now, let's get in the car and go see this opera. So not being afraid to write like a real person of like what you're going to do, and then make it granty, right? And so like to Jess's point, the stories of how does a math teacher decide to write an opera about, Euclid's Elements? What is that going to look like? Movement and body percussion. Why? So I think just really like first talking like a real person.
Okay.
And earlier Yaska had said like don't use buzzwords, and you have some buzzwords in the the beginning.
Ugh.
And then once you've written like a real person, go back and kind of refine it, with your grant brain on. Sorry, Yasa. Dasha, thank you.
How formal should I get? Like how like one I do my like I love how Adam said like it's true I'm a much better talker than writer, so I talk it out, transcribe that, and then how formal should I shoot it for?
Well, you want to be you want to find a balance, right? But the thing is, I used the word verbose earlier. You want to kind of cut out some of the verboseness typically, because you want to be as clear as possible for sure. So I would recommend finding a balance, and you want to just mirror the information that you know about the funder too. So like whatever, like, so if they have information on their website, like the way that they, say what they're all about, you kind of get a vibe, right?
Yeah.
Every time you look at somebody's website. So,
like if it's super like Times New Roman maroon banner,
right.
it okay.
But you're also gonna read too that they are typically, have a pretty lower level reading level of like how they produce their information, or produce their writing. So anyway, just thinking through that. But yeah, I would try to mirror a little bit of their vibe.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Totally.
And one thing too that I see here as kind of an opportunity is if they give you an open format of just give us 5 pages, for like this narrative, you can strategically use a couple of bullet points, which really draw the reader to the most important thing, right? So maybe you, the bullet points are how you are expanding on let's see here, like the importance of the combination of movement and body percussion and math, and then at least like you're highlighting kind of the main points. Yeah. So if somebody's like really,
skimming,
yeah, skimming,
okay.
You can know that they're probably at least their eyes are going to be drawn there.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that like through this, I just want to know more. And again, like I know that if you just talked about it, so when you say subverting traditional concert, like what? But no, like what does that mean? Why? Because we are grant writing robots, and like that. I keep going back to what does accessible mean in this scenario, and why is the subversion of what we think of as a typical production or a typical opera important in this way? Because there's I imagine some really, really interesting reasons that would draw people in and be like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, God, I don't think I'd write this today. It's so funny. I remembered so strongly being proud of this grant, and I didn't read it over before this thing, and now I'm like, 2021 Lainey would not be proud of this grant. But I think
it's got good stuff. You just need to allow yourself to go deeper.
Yeah. I will say whenever I generously hear the words subvert or blah, 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 you just want the listener to be fresh. Like you just want the listener to feel fresh as they approach whatever you're doing. So I would be trying to change some conventions or change some expectations so that, so just say that, Danny, I know that now in 2021.
Yeah. And then like why, right? Yeah. Why is it important for the listener to feel fresh?
Yeah. Their brains are open. I want their brains to be open, their hearts to be open.
Yeah.
Can I say that? I just want my listener hearts to be open.
But dig into that a little bit more. Why would you not present this at the Met? Let's say the Met was like, sure, come and do this and charge $200 a ticket.
Because I mean, honest, and oh God, I should have said this. My target audience really is people who hear math and shut down, or would think about new music and shut down, or like experimental music and be like, no, not for me. And I had this idea that like, by kind of getting rid of a lot of specific conventions that might be alienating to people, like maybe it'll just be really fun. Maybe people will be like, oh, this is new and different and I'm into it and I don't know what to expect, and it'll keep their brains open to lots of stuff that so I think that all of a sudden is like, okay, and I'm already, it's painting a picture for me when you talk about that, because like seriously, I
was that kid that was told like I wasn't smart enough for math
and
that kind of thing.
No.
Yeah. And so I like totally shut down, and now I'm like trying to run a company and doing QuickBooks, right? But if you were like, come to my math opera, I would rather die. But if you were like, come to this cool thing in your jeans after work and like, it's at a park,
exactly.
all of a sudden you're painting a picture, and you're also then able to talk more about the why, right? And then, Lainey, now you're getting into gender politics about how girls aren't allowed to do math, and you're getting into how STEM is so important and how the arts intersect with STEM and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So talking about it like a real person and really allowing yourself to run with those threads deeply, like super, super deeply, will start to create a ripple effect of like why you're doing this. So like painting that avatar, even if it's for yourself. My target audience is 27-year-olds in jeans, whatever. And this is why. And I think a lot of times we know this internally, but we're scared to write it down.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it, that like, this is the tone that I was like in the beginning when you were like, don't change your mission for the grant. And I just had this idea that like, they're going to want to fund this language kind of a person. And I'm not that kind of a person.
So 1, you're not that kind of a person. 2, you can still write like this and say more.
Yeah.
You can still write formally and say everything we talked about.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, we describe ourselves as a company as a social impact consulting agency that works through an intersectional feminist and anti-racist lens to empower small and startup nonprofits. Like, that's pretty formal and doesn't roll off the tongue, but it took a long time to get there. So what I would say is like, write like you're you, run it past people to really make sure that it tells the story. And then you can go back and refine it and make it a little bit more official. You don't want to be like totally all out there, but it is okay to have a personality in your grants.
Okay.
And I think you should.
I don't mean to interrupt, but Alexa has a residency app that they would like to share with us. They've taken the brave step of being subjected to this. So thanks, Lainey, for. I don't want to interrupt.
I feel like I've gotten a lot. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah. Well, so before we finish up with Lainey, so thinking about your next steps as a grant writer, what can you do?
I'm gonna call program officers.
Yeah. If nothing else, she's gonna call program officers. I think that's great. Yes.
And I'm gonna, and I will write like me. And then, Yasha Narvison is right over there. He reads everything I write, and he's the voice in my head who's like, oh, no intersections no subverting. Like, so I just need to.
To go back to one thing Jess said that I think is really powerful is use stories, right? Yeah. I bet that you've got stories about being a math teacher of the kids that were told they were too stupid for math, and seeing how they, when you started doing fun things, lit up or were able to process and their little brains exploded. That's interesting. Yeah. And we all relate to that in some way.
Yeah. Why didn't I write that? That's exactly why I wanted to write this up. Okay. Cool. Thank you so much. I'm really pumped. And I'm pumped for Alexa Dexter, who I'm promoting to panelist.
Yes!
Alexa Dexter, who just had the most gorgeous piece yesterday. Holy cannoli. Oh, the colors alone. I feel like you should give a masterclass, Alexa, on just color and image. Look at you. Oh, you're amazing. All right, I'm going to mute. Have fun.
Hi, Alexa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. So before we begin, will you give us just a really short introduction of like who you are, what's bringing you here today, and what residency the app is for?
Yeah, I'm a composer performer. I do a lot of work with toy instruments and live electronic processing, and this was a residency for the BMIS sound art, experimental sound art residency. Do you need me to share my screen? Do you want more info?
Just go ahead and share your screen with the grant, I think, and Jess, again, I think if you can kick us off, because you are definitely more versed in the art apps than me right now.
Okay. So to be clear, this is a residency that you are applying to participate in.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
a single person residency.
Got it.
Yeah, if you need me to like scroll anywhere,
Yes,
you
I
know.
will let you know. So this is, I'm looking for, okay, it's one of 2 pages. So it was a free form application to tell them a little bit more about what you are, what you're interested in doing in the residency, or can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, they had other questions, but this one was sort of the big one about like what you were planning on using the residency to do, what kind of, if you were going to be working on a project, what kind of project, what you'd be using the like, the space for the music studio for,
Okay.
and and who you are, like some things about you as like as an artist.
Okay. Yeah, can you scroll down just a little bit so I can start to scan?
I'm like here for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alexa, is song spells something that your audience will understand? Because that is a new word to me.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a hybrid thing that I've made up,
Okay.
that I sort of describe a little bit more later in the grant.
Yeah, I would say, initially song spell is something that I would kind of describe a little bit from the beginning and
Mm-hmm.
even like expand upon, what it is. So is that the word you describe to like describe your work and your creations?
So it's a word to describe one aspect of like an idea about how music can be a trend, like the act of listening can be a ritual, and that having what you listen to and the sort of like the stories that you tell yourself or whatever it is that you're sort of like playing in your head or having on in your environment has like having the capacity to create some sort of transformation, to sort of have a space where you can have like some dream space, and then like use that act of listening to sort of set your intentions in motion.
Say that.
Yeah, say that.
Just
Yeah,
say that.
I love that. I love that. I would definitely include that in kind of the introduction to talk about like, because that just starts to speak a little bit about like why you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That description of what song spell means to you and what you want it to mean to your listeners. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think did you go through, is that just from the first paragraph or did you go through the second paragraph?
I've kind of gone through the second paragraph.
Okay.
And now can you scroll back up super briefly? Because I want to
Up to here.
reread the question, what they were asking. So, what's your career interests? Yeah, okay, your interests. Basically your interest and then what you're interested in doing.
Yeah.
I would, so my, first feedback is definitely like opening more or including more in the beginning song spell and like kind of like we said before, creating a little bit of a story about like why you use that word, what it means to you, what you want to convey to your audience. And then from there, you can really get into I would say like then talking about like what the trauma informed approach, right? I'm trying to think of like, so that kind of why like what you just talking about song spell, what it means to you, and then like again just expanding on the why and the type of approach you're using, and then more how does it feel to think about then transitioning into how you craft your work, how you create,
Okay.
get and using kind of the details of like the like how you produce.
Yeah.
Are you taking
Awesome.
notes?
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
Okay, awesome. I didn't want to interrupt you. Can you scroll down a little bit more? I want to see more at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, from like in this paragraph or further down.
Yeah, this paragraph. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so some of this stuff I think can be almost like moved up into the like description of what song spell is. So, you know, binding energies and dismantling abusive power dynamics, all of that is like speaks to the why.
Mm-hmm.
So I would yeah, kind of combine all of that to really like open with the why you're doing it and the need for this.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting the sense that it's almost it's like a why, which speaks to the like need for what this is, and then later on you can describe in the how.
Okay.
Right? And that can then kind of speak to like how you're going to use this residency, how this residency can empower you to progress this work. Now, I'm curious so this residency application, when did you submit this? Is this recent?
Yeah, it was I would say probably like May.
May. Okay. And when do you hear back?
I did hear back.
Oh, you did hear back.
Yeah.
Were you able to get any feedback on your submission?
No, they weren't offering feedback.
They weren't offering feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know who, there was only one residency awarded, is that right?
I think there were two.
Oh, there were two. That's pretty competitive.
It's very competitive, yeah.
Yeah. And this was your first time applying?
It's the first time that they've opened applications for this particular residency. It's a new one.
It's a new one.
Yeah.
Well, I will definitely encourage you to apply again because you have, obviously, just like all of us, an awesome story, an awesome project to share. And I would just kind of, I'm wondering too, like now as you're looking at this again, is there something that maybe you want to like communicate, articulate that you maybe didn't?
I mean, nothing really comes to mind for me.
Okay.
I think it's really, really awesome, Alexa. And I think, it's a really great example going back to sort of Lainey's questions of this is deeply personal and it says what it says. And there are some buzzwords and there's some places where I think you could have, edited and all of that, but it still reads as a formal grant application. Right. And I think it's such a great example of like, you can be yourself truly and wholly and still write a grant. And yeah, Lainey says craving more specific descriptions. And so I think actually, Alexa, can you scroll back up?
Yeah.
I think what you said at the very start of this about like the voices in our head, the stories we tell ourselves. And then at the end, you talk about this music as a vehicle for self-care and sort of self-exploration. That to me is like, I would want that right up front because you lay out the problem that we need to deconstruct all of these really damaging systems. And then you talk about what you do, but you don't say necessarily clearly to a reader who doesn't live in this world, why, right? Exactly what it is. And it's not until later where you say you're going to create this, self-publish this work, and that's going to be a tool for transformative self-care. So I think really laying it out, this is the problem, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the outcome will help. And then you can dig into how the whole thing, space, the intentions. And I think my only other feedback would be you have some very long sentences. And I say that as someone who is very verbose. So I would definitely, and this is for all of you, run this through tools that I'll send up a wrap-up email. There's a tool called the Hemingway app that will grade your writing on what scale it is. like what grade level it is, and like pull out those sentences that are really, really complex. Because yes, Hemingway app, it's free. I know, have thoughts about Hemingway, but whatever. And of course we want, in all good writing, a mix of complex sentences and simple sentences. But when we're writing something where our goal is just to get the point across, we really want to make sure that it's accessible. And so that's that conversation. Yep, that's the one, Lainey. That's that combination of using buzzwords wisely and probably editing this so that someone who is just reading it for the first time can digest it a little bit more quickly, because you do have these very beautiful, almost musical sentences, but they are a little hard to digest. And I will also say, I think, we talked about like kind of articulating what sound spell is a little bit more, is just be careful of, you have these beautiful long sentences where, assess, access, cultivate, claim, and share resources as we forge our own paths forward. That's getting a little into buzzword for me. Like, what are those paths forward and why? Where are we going? And I think that you can dig a little bit more into that, like you would over coffee with someone, to talk about what is that journey towards, sort of like transformative and revolutionary self-care, and why do we need to be going down a different path towards that? Why do we need to be assessing? So there's a few areas where I feel like with some tweaks, you could just really crack open even more deeply and say what you need to say, because you're so close.
Yes.
Thank you.
And as I'm looking in, because I was skimming, I do see that you wrote a sentence about a little bit about song spell, but I would, expand upon that a little bit. But again, that was me skimming. So also sometimes that's what a reviewer may be doing.
Yeah.
Which is why sometimes the shorter sentences can
bullet points. Yeah, because they're probably reading, how many, residency apps did they get? And I think my last piece of feedback with this, Alexa, is we work in this world, right? So we work through an intersectional anti-racist lens. And so I read this and I'm like, yes, bring it, girl. But not everyone is going to see these words and feel like drawn in. They might feel a little bit like, okay, this is not necessarily a world I live in. If you start throwing white supremacy around, which I do in like every conversation, it can be a little hard. So really, again, that not being buzzwordy in this anti-racist space can be very, very helpful, because even the most progressive organizations can still have a lot of these harmful systems. And we can't assume that their reviewers are all going to be approaching this with the same integrity and openness that you, Alexa, are writing it. So not to say like, don't be yourself, but sometimes really spelling it out, the why, and not making assumptions about like even what self-care means, can help folks that might be at a different point in their journey or might have their own assumptions. Like I was talking to someone who I consider incredibly open and progressive and well-educated, and she was like, well, do you feel like people are going to think you hate men if you describe yourself as intersectionally feminist? And I was like, I don't really care if they do, but those are the sort of things people say to us. So food for thought. And I love that you bring so much of yourself into this, and it is so brave and it is so compelling. So it's finding that balance of how you can educate while also having your own, your commitment to your integrity.
Awesome. Thank you.
Totally. One other thing that I just had a thought of, like, as you're reviewing your own writing, they may, like, for a residency application, they may actually take the first paragraph and want to put it on their website to like showcase you.
Yeah.
Or paste it into their social media to be like, hey, look at this, one of a couple of residence artists that we're having this fall. So anyways, just a thought about like another layer of how you can look at this, another lens. They may want to be like, okay, yes, this first paragraph, boom, I can say this is what this person is all about, and this is what they're doing. I'm just thinking of like the arts organizations I've worked with who would totally do that. Yeah.
And Yasha had a good point that some of those words can shut people down. Like, I'm not a feminist because, and that's we could talk all about systemic racism and sexism in the world all day. But again, another talk. But Alexa, I think you're going in such a great direction. And I can't wait to see this like continue to evolve. And thank you so much for sharing it.
Yes, thank you so much for your feedback. I really appreciate it. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, clap, clap, clap. Okay, so we have about 9 minutes left together. I'm sad already. So I'm going to share my screen again. And we did that. So we always like to do a little resource share. And Lainey and New Music Gathering team, if I can ask you to just like capture these chats somewhere, then we can put it into our wrap-up email. But what is something that you need help right now? Whether it's, gosh, I really could have someone on this group review my grant application, or how do I find grants, or I don't know how to do a budget, or I need to take my dog to get their nails clipped. Do you have any recommendations? Whatever it is, how do we support each other? What's something that someone else might have an idea of? So raise your hand if you want to share something you need help with, or just chat. But let's just take a minute or two to share some ideas and supports. And then we'll create this little like resource directory of what we all need right now. Like the Hemingway app is one of my go-tos. And Lainey, thanks for chatting that. It's such a great tool. And of course, now that I've asked that, everyone's like, I can't think of a thing. We need confidence. Yes. Hopefully after today, you all feel a little bit more confident, and I'll send out like a whole bunch of resources and stuff. But I think you're just keep doing it.
Be your own cheerleader too.
Does the Hemingway app. So we're all here with the jokes. We all need kind readers. Yes, manifest that. Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, if y'all think of anything in particular, please, shoot us emails. We'll share our contact information in our follow-up email later this week. And before we let you go, so we love talking grants. We're so excited to have this. Was just a fabulous group of people today. So we'll send up an email wrap up. I'll send that to Lainey to share. And we are hosting like tons of more events in Q4. So I'll include that. If you are like, gosh, we would really like you to berate us for 90 minutes, we can do that. We do 4 folks that go through this workshop. We offer a one-on-one intensive grant review. So that link will be available as well. And we'd certainly love to dig in further with folks. And then we are launching September 22nd, our 6-week crash course fundraising intensive. And it's something where we do both a 6-month mastermind and a 6-week crash course. We'll be launching our 6-month mastermind probably in the spring, but we're doing a 6-week crash course to get you ready for end of year giving. Grants are part of it, but it really is how to create a fundraising plan that actually works with the tools and resources you have, so that at the end of the 6 weeks, you have not only a plan for your end of year Giving Tuesday giving, but also a fundraising plan for 2022 that incorporates individual giving, grants. If you are a nonprofit working with your board, monthly giving, everything, soup to nuts. So we'll send that out. And like all of our programs, that has a pay what you can model, starting at $300 for 6 weeks. So we really try to make it as accessible to everyone. So I would love to have y'all there, because y'all sound amazingly smart and awesome. And we would have so much fun. So y'all, thank you for being here today and for living our intentions of flexibility and go with the flow. And I hope that you learned something new, and we would certainly love to stay in touch with each and every one of you.
Woo! Squids!
Woo! Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can I ask you to put your contact info in the chat so folks plan along, months and years and decades from now can get in touch?
Yes. And like I said, Lainey, I'll send you like a wrap-up email that you can send, and that'll have my contact information, all the stuff. Please feel free to share this recording. But and if you didn't get to share today and you're like, oh, they weren't as scary as I thought, we have our second one tomorrow. And so you can do it again.
Come do it again. For folks who want to come, maybe not even share, but just come and be there again tomorrow. It'll be helpful, right? They'll get to watch 2 other folks master classing.
Absolutely.
I recommend pop by. Come have a sandwich while it's happening.
Or you can be like, yeah, I call all the time. Wow, you guys didn't know you were supposed to do that. That's so embarrassing.
That's what I do number 1, actually.
Number 1. How do my grants calendar? You should see it. It's great.
Before tomorrow at 3, I'm gonna make a grants, gonna make all the calls and be like, oh yeah, I have first name basis.
I've called 10 funders this year. It's fine. I love it. I love it. Well, I can't wait to see New Music Gathering team tomorrow.
Yes.
Hopefully some attendees and some new faces. But in the meantime, go enjoy. I think there's a concert next, so go enjoy that. And we will talk to you soon.
Yes, to plug our other stuff. Thank you so much, Giant Squids. Everyone, it's a concert frenzy the rest of the day. There's a 3 p.m., there's a 5 p.m., there's an 8 p.m. I actually think there's 2 5 p.m.s. Come join us at both 5 p.m.s. There's 2 different streams, but in the program you can click on stream 1 or stream 2. 1 p.m., 3 p.m., 2 5 p.m.s, and an 8 p.m. And it's lots of great stuff. Thank you so much, Giant Squids. You're amazing. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.